I'm Dr. T and welcome to my office. So today I'd like to talk about cell membranes. If you have a cell, it's going to be encased in a cell membrane, and if it's a eukaryotic cell, it's going to have lots of cell membranes compartmentalizing the innards of that cell. They make a nice, boundary for your cell. Nice walls, essentially, although cell walls are a completely different thing. So when we're looking at the cell membranes, these are going to be usually described best by what we call the fluid mosaic model. So this idea is that membranes are basically fluids. They're able to flow around. They are comprised predominantly of assorted phospholipids, and that these phospholipids can float around kind of like, buoys in the ocean. They can shuffle past each other. Now, there are two sides to a cell membrane, and it's very hard for something on the outside to flip to the inside or vice versa. But going along and staying on the same side, bumping around, migrating, very, very straightforward. Now, the other part of the name really gets to kind of into how much stuff is going on in these membranes. And that's the mosaic part. So you think mosaic, kind of like, one of those pictures made up of little tiles. So like those pictures, there's lots of little things in the membrane. The bulk of it is going to be assorted phospholipids, but not all of the membrane is made up of the same phospholipids. You'll have regions called membrane rafts that will be made up of larger phospholipids, lots of things like sphingomycins, etc. That'll be in those, making kind of a thick part that kind of floats around. And then on the surface of the membrane, you'll have proteins. You'll have proteins that are kind of taking up part of one side, so they're partially embedded into the membrane, and others that go all the way clean through the membrane and float through it. And these will provide important functions. A lot of our pharmaceuticals interact with proteins that are in or on membranes. But it's not just proteins. There's carbohydrates like crazy on the membrane, and those can be attached to proteins. Those can be attached to assorted lipids. And speaking of lipids, the phospholipids aren't the only lipids in the membranes. There's quite often lots of sterols, which are used to kind of toughen up the membrane, as well as a few other functions within the membrane. So you've got a lot going on with these membranes that are going to do a lot of things for the cells. They're very much like the walls, and if you look at the walls of your house, unless you're doing a very minimalistic decoration style, there's lots and lots of things on the wall. I've got that reproduction of the map on my wall behind me. If I was to zoom the camera around, if you see a couple of the other ones where I'm from the computer, I've got pictures sorted place. There's windows and whatnot. And yeah, the proteins can act like pictures and windows and other things. Same for the carbohydrates. Not so much on the windows, but they do act like labels and signage. So the membranes are a very, very important part of the cell. And in later videos, I'll talk about a lot of the things that go into membranes. The proteins get very, very interesting. The carbohydrates are one that we don't talk about as much as we really should, because it turns out when you look at a cell, a lot of the pictures that you see in diagrams are kind of misleading. It looks as if you've got the cell and it's just, the end is the membrane. But for eukaryotic cells especially, beyond the membrane, it's just covered in carbohydrates. Short oligosaccharides are the oligomer form of the carbohydrate. Just coating it's like a carpet. So there's a lot going on those membranes. So I'll see you in later videos, but until then, have a wonderful day.